the winter he came to ruin her. Snow blanketed the road leading to Ravenshade Manor, a once proud estate tucked deep in the English countryside. Its grey stone walls bore the scars of years and scandal. Smoke drifted from a single chimney, a fragile thread of life against the merciless sky. Through the storm came a carriage, black as morning. Inside sat Lord Adrian Blackwell, the Duke of Greystone, a man whose name carried both reverence and dread through London's parlours. His gloved hand rested on the hilt of his cane, though he no longer needed it. He had once been broken, left for dead in a duel orchestrated by Lord Thomas Hargrove. And now Thomas was dead. But vengeance, Adrian believed, could still breathe, in the form of Hargrove's only daughter, the woman he had come to destroy. The carriage slowed before the iron gates. Adrian's dark eyes lifted, scanning the frost-bitten grounds. "So this is where the great Lord Hargrove's legacy rots," he murmured, his voice low and cold. The driver glanced back. "Shall I announce you, my lord?" "No," Adrian said. "Let her believe I am just another suitor, come to pity the orphaned lady. The rest she will learn, in time." Inside Ravenshade Manor, the fire crackled weakly in the grand hall. Lady Evelyn Hargrove sat at the piano, her fingers tracing the ivory keys, though she did not play. Her world had grown quiet since her father's death and the debts that followed. Most of the servants had gone. Only Mrs. Linton, the housekeeper, and a stable boy remained. The once lavish estate had turned into a mausoleum of memories and whispers. She wore mourning black, not because society demanded it, but because it matched the ache in her heart. Her father had been many things, stern, proud, distant, but he had been her world. And now that world was crumbling. When the sound of wheels on gravel reached her ears, she rose quickly. Few visitors came this far into the countryside any more. Hope flickered, perhaps news of reprieve, a creditor's mercy. But when the door opened, it was not mercy that entered. He stepped into the hall like a shadow taking form, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of poise that commanded silence. His coat was black velvet trimmed with silver, his eyes darker still. The snow melting in his hair caught the firelight like shards of ice. "Lady Hargrove," he greeted, voice deep, measured, almost too calm. "Forgive the intrusion. The roads are dreadful. I feared I might not reach Ravenshade before the storm worsened." Evelyn's breath caught. "My lord, you are most welcome, though I confess I was not expecting company." "Few expect fate," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Allow me to introduce myself. Adrian Blackwell, Duke of Greystone." The name struck her like a bell. She remembered her father's curses whispered late at night. "That vulture, that merciless snake, Blackwell will bleed us, all dry." And now, here he stood in her hall. Still, Evelyn drew herself upright, chin high, refusing to show fear. "You honour Ravenshade with your presence, your grace. What brings you to so remote a place?" His eyes lingered on her, long enough for her to feel it. Her grace was not of London's glittering ladies. It was quieter, gentler. Chestnut hair framed her pale face. Her eyes, the colour of autumn leaves, held both strength and sorrow. She was not the villain's daughter he had imagined. "I've come," Adrian said slowly, "to see the estate. There are matters of inheritance. Your late father owed my family a great deal. Perhaps we might discuss how you intend to repay that debt." The silence between them turned to glass. Evelyn's voice faltered. "I was not aware of such a claim." "Oh, I assure you," he replied, stepping closer. "The records are quite clear. Your father borrowed from me more than he could ever repay. and with his passing, that debt falls to you." Her breath trembled. "But there is nothing left. The land yields little, the servants have gone. All I have is this house." He tilted his head, studying her face as if weighing truth from performance. "Then it would seem," he said softly, "your world now belongs to me." She stood frozen. The fire hissed behind her, casting long shadows across the marble floor. "Surely you would not cast a lady into the snow," she said quietly, a plea threading through her composure. His lips curved. "Would I not? You mistake me for a kind man, Lady Evelyn." There was something dangerous in the calmness of his tone, but behind it, something else. A hesitation, faint as a heartbeat. She stepped forward, eyes bright with defiance. "Then do as you will, my lord. Take the walls, the roof, the name, but you cannot take my dignity." Adrian's gaze flickered. Admiration, irritation, something in between. "We shall see," he murmured. That night, the storm worsened. The manor moaned under the weight of snow and memory. Adrian remained in the guest wing, though he did not sleep. His candle burned until dawn. He told himself he stayed awake to review the documents, the legal chains that would bind her. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing by the fire. Proud, unyielding, her voice trembling but never breaking. This was not the girl he expected. This was a woman shaped by loss and loneliness, holding her crumbling world together with nothing but grace. He had promised himself years ago that the name Hargrove would be erased from England's ledgers. But as the winter wind sighed against the glass, he wondered, was vengeance truly so simple when the enemy had her eyes? The daughter of his enemy. The next morning broke pale and cold, sunlight glinting off the snow like shards of glass. Ravenshade Manor looked almost peaceful beneath its white shroud. But inside, the air was heavy with unease. Hargrove stood at the window, her breath misting the glass as she watched the Duke of Greystone walking the estate grounds. Even from afar, he moved with the kind of assured purpose that made lesser men step aside. There was no denying his presence. Dark, refined, dangerous. A man accustomed to command, not request. And yet, beneath that authority was something else. A loneliness she could almost feel. Down below, Adrian Blackwell's boots crunched against the snow as he surveyed the land. It was worse than he imagined. Neglected fences, frozen wells, stables nearly in ruin. Once, the Hargroves had been one of the wealthiest families in Yorkshire. Now, their estate was a shadow, and Evelyn was its ghost. He should have felt satisfaction. This was justice, or what passed for it in his world. But vengeance, he was learning, had a bitter taste when the guilty were already gone. Mrs. Linton approached him with a cautious curtsy. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but her ladyship insists you take breakfast in the drawing-room. It's too cold to wander the grounds." Adrian nodded curtly. "Tell her I will join her shortly." As the housekeeper left, his eyes returned to the distant figure in the window. She watched him openly, unaware of his gaze. "Your father ruined my life," he murmured under his breath, "and now I must decide what to do with yours." The drawing-room was warm when he entered, soft firelight flickering across faded tapestries and stacks of unpaid ledgers. Evelyn rose as he stepped in, her morning gown replaced with a simple grey dress, its sleeves slightly frayed. She looked like a lady who had forgotten how to live like one, but remembered enough to try. "Good morning, Your Grace," she said with quiet composure. "I trust the accommodations were acceptable." He inclined his head. "Comfortable enough for a condemned house." She stiffened. You mean to condemn it, then? I mean to claim what is owed. He took a seat across from her, every motion precise, deliberate. Your father borrowed £40,000. With interest, the debt stands far higher. The estate cannot cover half that amount. Her fingers trembled as she poured tea, but her voice held. Then what will you do, my lord? Take the walls from around me? If necessary. And leave me what? The snow and the fields. He met her gaze evenly. You'll survive. Women always do. She gave a soft, incredulous laugh. The first hint of emotion he had heard from her. You speak of survival as though it were noble. I assure you, Your Grace, it is merely exhausting. Adrian said nothing. The sound of her voice, fragile but unyielding, stirred something buried too deep to name. She looked nothing like her father. Her eyes held warmth where Thomas Hargroves had burned with arrogance. But her name alone was enough to feed the hatred he had carried for years. And yet, sitting before her now, he found that hatred faltered. Later that day, Evelyn ventured to the stables, determined to reclaim some order. Snow crept into her boots as she inspected the damaged roof. She hadn't expected the Duke to follow, but when she turned, there he was, coat flaring in the wind, watching her with that unreadable gaze. You should not be out here without proper gloves, he said sharply. I've no other pair, she replied simply, brushing snow from her skirts. I dismissed most of the servants months ago. There's little coin left for luxuries. Then you'll freeze before spring. She smiled faintly. Would that solve your dilemma, my lord? A dead debtor? He stepped closer. Too close. Do not tempt me to cruelty, Lady Evelyn. Her chin lifted. And do not pretend it isn't already your intention. The wind whipped between them, stirring loose strands of her hair. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then his voice softened, almost against his will. You remind me of someone I once knew. She blinked. Someone you despised. No, he said quietly. Someone I lost. Her breath caught. But before she could ask more, he turned sharply, retreating toward the manor as though his words had betrayed him. That night, Evelyn could not sleep. She paced her room, candlelight flickering across her face. Every encounter with the Duke left her shaken, not from fear, but confusion. He was her enemy. He had come to take everything. And yet sometimes when he looked at her, there was a sorrow in his eyes deeper than vengeance. Down the corridor, Adrian stood before the window of his guest chamber, staring out into the snow. He had never meant to speak of her, his sister Clara, the innocent girl ruined by Lord Hargrove's deceit years ago. Clara's death had driven him to ruin the Hargroves in return. But Evelyn, she was not her father. And the thought twisted the knife in his conscience. He whispered to the dark, I promised Clara I would make them pay, but what if the price is my own soul? The next morning, Evelyn entered the library to find him already there, leaning over a stack of papers. I took the liberty of reviewing your accounts, he said without looking up. If you wish to retain the manor, there may be alternatives. Her brows furrowed. Alternatives? You could sell certain holdings, or remain here under my supervision. I would take ownership of the estate, and you would stay on as its caretaker, in name only. She stared at him, astonished. You would let me stay? He shrugged slightly. It would benefit me to keep someone who understands the land. Consider it efficiency, not mercy. But Evelyn saw the truth behind the words. He was offering her a cage, one lined with silver perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. Still she bowed her head. Then I accept your grace. I will remain at Ravenshade as your caretaker." Nodded once, his jaw tightening. So be it. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Lady Evelyn," he said quietly, "you may despise me now, but one day you'll understand why I came here." She met his gaze, her voice trembling but steady. "I do not despise you, my lord. I pity you. For vengeance is a home colder than this manor could ever be." Her words struck deep, deeper than she could have known. And as she walked away, Adrian realized the unthinkable. The daughter of his enemy had just wounded him, not with hatred, but with truth. Secrets beneath the manor walls. The snow began to thaw in the weeks that followed, revealing the first timid traces of spring. Yet inside Ravenshade Manor, the cold lingered, not from weather, but from the silence that had settled between its two inhabitants. Evelyn kept to her duties, restoring the library, tending to the ledgers, overseeing repairs. The Duke of Greystone, for all his severity, made no move to drive her out. He stayed longer than he had intended, citing unfinished business, though even he could not define what business remained. Each morning, they met in the study to review the estate's affairs. Each night, they parted with words unsaid. It was a strange truce, forged in debt and silence. One evening, while sorting through her father's old correspondence in the library, Evelyn came across a sealed envelope wedged behind a drawer. The paper was brittle, yellowed with age. Her breath quickened when she saw the name scrawled across it. Her hands trembled. She broke the seal carefully and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was elegant, yet the words burned. "You have taken everything from me, my sister's honour, my family's peace, my name. There will be retribution, Hargrove. The debts you believe forgotten will be repaid, with blood or with ruin. Adrian Blackwell." Evelyn sank into the nearest chair, heart pounding. So it was true. Her father had wronged him, grievously enough to drive him to vengeance. She pressed her palm to her mouth. What had father done? In that moment, she understood. The Duke's coldness, his arrival, his threats, they were not born of greed. They were born of pain, and she was paying for sins that were not hers. The next day she sought him out. Adrian was in the stables, his coat discarded, sleeves rolled, repairing a broken gate himself. She had never seen a nobleman so at ease with hard labour. The sight unsettled her, not for its strangeness, but for its humanity. "My lord," she called softly. He straightened, his expression guarded. "Lady Evelyn, I found a letter," she said, clutching the paper to her chest. "From you to my father." The silence that followed was heavy as thunder. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You should not have touched that. I had to. I had to know the truth. You hate me for his deeds, but I do not even know what those deeds were." He turned away sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Leave it, Evelyn." "No," she said, voice trembling. "Tell me what he did to you." His jaw clenched. "He ruined my sister," Adrian said finally, each word falling like a blade. "He courted her, promised marriage, then abandoned her when scandal came. She was 19. She took her life a month later." Evelyn's eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, God, I didn't know. He never spoke of—" "Of course he didn't." His voice cracked, anger and grief entwined. He buried her shame beneath his fortune and his lies. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "If I could trade places with him, if I could undo what he did—" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the fury in his gaze faltered. "I wanted to see your family fall," he whispered, "to make you suffer as I did. But when I look at you—" He stopped himself, swallowing the words that would betray him. "When you look at me," she asked, her tone barely a breath. He turned away. "I see her, the kindness, the innocence, and it makes me hate you all the more." Evelyn shook her head, tears glistening like frost. "Then hate me if you must, my lord. But I will not repay cruelty with cruelty. You are not the only one haunted by ghosts." She left him standing there, torn between the man he was and the man he swore never to become. That night, the manor's quiet was broken by a scream. Evelyn raced down the corridor to find Mrs. Linton pointing toward the cellar door. "Rats, my lady, or something worse," the old woman stammered. "The noise came from below." Evelyn lit a lamp and descended the narrow stone stairs herself, heart pounding. The air grew colder, damper. And there, at the far end of the cellar, she found something she had never seen before. A small wooden door hidden behind crates. She pushed it open. Inside was a chamber, lined with shelves, old books, and boxes sealed with her father's crest. But what caught her breath was the bundle of letters atop the desk, addressed in a delicate feminine hand, to Lord Thomas Hargrove, from Clara Blackwell. She read one trembling letter aloud, the words soft and tragic. "You said you loved me, Thomas. You swore the world would forgive us once we wed. Now you do not answer my letters. I am with child, and you have left me to the whispers of the city. Please, for the sake of what we once were, come for me." Evelyn's tears fell freely, staining the ink. Clara Blackwell. The name echoed like a ghost through the cold air. Her father's cruelty had destroyed a woman's life, and in turn, destroyed Adrian's. She didn't hear him approach until his shadow fell across the doorway. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. She turned, holding the letter out to him. "I found these. You should see them." He took the parchment, eyes scanning the sage, words. His face went pale. "These are hers," he whispered. "Her letters, my God, he kept them." Evelyn stepped closer. "He must have meant to answer her, or he kept them as trophies," Adrian said bitterly. "Proof of his conquest." The look in his eyes then, anguish, fury, loss, made her ache. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. "Your sister's suffering was not in vain," she said softly. "You found her truth. You can let her rest now." He stared at their joined hands, his gloved, hers bare, and for a heartbeat neither spoke. Then he exhaled, the fight draining from him. "I should hate you," he said hoarsely, "but I can't." "Then don't," she whispered. "Just stop fighting ghosts." When they emerged from the cellar, dawn had begun to rise, pale gold washing over the snow-drenched fields. Something between them had changed, fragile, dangerous but real. Adrian looked at her, the soft light catching in his dark hair. "You have a strange gift, Lady Evelyn." "And what is that, Your Grace?" "To make a man doubt his own vengeance." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Perhaps vengeance was never yours to begin with." He said nothing, but when she turned to leave, he whispered her name as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "Evelyn." That night, he did not sleep. He sat in his study, reading Clara's letters until the candle burned out. And with each word, the walls he'd built around his heart began to crumble. He had come to Ravenshade to destroy a legacy. But what he had found was something far more dangerous than hatred, forgiveness. And perhaps the beginning of something he had sworn he would never feel again. A dance with the devil's son. The snow had melted, leaving behind glistening puddles and the scent of wet earth. The air was crisp but alive with the promise of new beginnings, though inside Ravenshade Manor, both its inhabitants were trapped in the uncertain season between guilt and something perilously close to longing. For weeks, Adrian and Evelyn lived under the same roof, bound not by debt now, but by the heavy silence that followed revelation. The letters of Clara Blackwell had changed everything. He was no longer the executioner, and she no longer merely the daughter of his enemy. They had become something undefined, fragile, forbidden, and it terrified them both. One morning, as Evelyn arranged wildflowers in the hall, a knock echoed through the manor. Mrs. Linton appeared, breathless. "A messenger, my lady, from Lord Pembroke. He asks if you'll attend his masquerade ball next week in York." Evelyn blinked. "A masquerade? Why on earth would he invite me?" Mrs. Linton hesitated. "Word of the Duke's stay has reached the city. They say Ravenshade thrives again, that you and his Grace have rekindled society's favour." Evelyn flushed scarlet. "That is absurd. The Duke and I are not," but Mrs. Linton's knowing look silenced her. That evening, Evelyn found Adrian in the library, reviewing estate plans by lamplight. His expression softened when she mentioned the invitation. "A masquerade, you say?" he mused, voice low. "How convenient! The gossips will feast." "I thought perhaps I should decline," she murmured, "and give them more to whisper about. No, attend. Let them see that Ravenshade still stands. Let them see that you do." She met his gaze, searching for mockery, but found only quiet sincerity. "And you, my lord, will you attend?" His mouth curved faintly. "If only to ensure no fool dared speak ill of you." The words sent warmth rushing through her, a strange, traitorous warmth. She turned quickly, hiding her smile. "Then I shall go," she said, "for the manor's sake, of course." "Of course," he echoed, though his eyes lingered longer than they should have. The night of the masquerade arrived beneath a silver moon. Evelyn stood before her mirror, breath catching as Mrs. Linton fastened the last ribbon of her gown. It was pale blue silk, simple yet elegant, and around her neck hung a single pearl, her mother's last gift. Her mask, trimmed with silver lace, framed her eyes like frost. She hardly recognized herself. Downstairs, Adrian waited in his black attire and matching mask, the very image of a fallen angel. When she descended the staircase, his breath stilled. "Lady Evelyn," he murmured, "you are remarkable." She smiled shyly. "And you, my lord, look every inch the villain they call you." "Then perhaps the devil will dance tonight," he said, offering his arm. She hesitated, then took it. And thus began the night that would alter both their worlds. The ballroom at Lord Pembroke's estate was ablaze with candlelight and music. Gold chandeliers glittered above a sea of silken masks. Whispered greetings followed them as they entered, the ruined heiress and the dark duke, walking side by side. Evelyn felt the eyes of the ton upon her, but for the first time in months, she did not shrink. She lifted her chin, her hands steady in Adrian's. The music swelled, a waltz, haunting and slow. "Dance with me," he said softly. "My lord, people will talk. Let them." Before she could protest, he drew her into his arms. The world blurred. All she saw were his eyes through the mask, dark, intent, unguarded. His hand rested against the small of her back, guiding her effortlessly across the floor. She had never danced with such grace, nor felt her heart beat so wildly. "You waltz beautifully," she whispered. "I was taught by someone who loved it," he said. "Clara adored music. She always said dancing was the closest one could come to flying." Evelyn's heart clenched. "Then tonight, she flies through you." He looked at her then, truly looked, and for a moment, vengeance, grief, and duty melted away. Only two souls remained, the man who had come to destroy, and the woman who refused to let him. The waltz slowed. Neither moved to separate. "Evelyn," he whispered, her name a sin on his lips, "do you know what it is to fight yourself?" "All my life," she breathed. "Then you understand." His hand brushed her cheek, the faintest touch, and it burned. She should have pulled away, but she didn't. She couldn't. "Adrian," she whispered, trembling, "if we continue this, it will destroy us," he finished, voice rough. "Yes, and yet—" And yet he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was desperate, restrained only by the years of rage and sorrow that lived between them. The world disappeared, the music, the crowd, the whispers. There was only his mouth against hers, the taste of confession and ruin. When they broke apart, breathless, the mask of the Duke of Greystone was gone, and for the first time she saw the man beneath. "I should apologize," he murmured. "Then don't," she replied. But fate, cruel as ever, does not allow stolen moments to last. From across the ballroom, a voice called out, "Lady Hargrove, how very bold, to dance with your father's enemy!" The music stopped. The crowd turned. A man stepped forward, Lord Edwin Fenton, a creditor of her late father, his smile oily with spite. "Tell me, your grace," he said loudly, "have you forgiven the Hargroves, or merely found a more pleasing method of punishment?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's face burned with humiliation. Adrian's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, his voice like thunder. "You will hold your tongue, Fenton, or lose it." The room fell silent. Fenton sneered. "Touchy, are we? The Duke defends his enemy's daughter. How charming!" Evelyn caught Adrian's arm, whispering, "Please, don't, not here." But the damage was done. The whispers swelled like waves. "Let them talk," he said coldly, escorting her out. "You owe them nothing." They rode home in silence. The carriage creaked, the air thick with everything they could not say. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "They will ruin you for this. Let them try." She turned to him, tears glinting in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? You should despise me. You said yourself—" "I said I came to destroy you," he interrupted, "and I meant it." He paused, voice breaking. "But somehow you've destroyed me instead." The confession hung between them, trembling in the dark. When they reached Ravenshade, neither moved to leave the carriage. The moonlight through the frosted window painted her face in silver. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "If there were another world," he said softly, "one where my sister still lived, and your father had been kind, perhaps we might have met without the weight of ghosts." Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. "Then in that world, my lord, I would have loved you." His eyes closed. "And in this one," she said, "I must not." She stepped out into the cold, leaving him with the taste of what could never be. And as the carriage door closed, Adrian realized that the vengeance he had once craved had become his punishment, for he had found love in the very place he swore to destroy. The fire and the fall. The night after the masquerade, Ravenshade Manor was silent, the kind of silence that holds its breath before the storm breaks. Evelyn stood by her window, staring at the dark fields beyond. The air still carried the faint scent of his cologne. Sandalwood and smoke from when he had taken her hand in the carriage. Her lips burned with the memory of his kiss. She had told him they must not love each other, and yet every heartbeat betrayed her. Below, in the study, Adrian Blackwell sat before the dying fire, his jaw set, a decanter untouched beside him. He had faced duels, scandals, even death, but not this, not her. He had spent years building himself into something cold and invincible, a weapon shaped by grief. But Evelyn's voice, her courage, her kindness, they had cracked him open. and now he didn't know whether to curse her or thank her for it. At dawn, a rider arrived at the gates, spurring his horse hard. The servant who answered returned pale-faced, clutching a sealed letter. Evelyn had just come down for breakfast when Adrian met her in the corridor, the parchment crushed in his fist. "You've been corresponding with Lord Pembroke." His tone was razor-sharp. She blinked, startled. "No, I haven't." He thrust the letter at her. "Then what is this?" She unfolded it, her pulse quickening as she read, "My dearest Lady Hargrove, rumour travels faster than truth. I write only to warn you. The Duke's enemies have begun to question your relationship. They whisper that you have bewitched him, that you seek to reclaim your family's fortune through seduction. I urge you to be cautious. London's wolves are not as forgiving as I. Pembroke." Her hand trembled. "I didn't ask for this." "But you caused it," Adrian said coldly. "I warned you what they would say." "You insisted I attend," she protested, "because I believed you could withstand gossip, not encourage it." His words struck like blows. She flinched. "Do you think me so foolish as to play the coquette, Your Grace?" "I think," he hissed, "that you are your father's daughter, and I was a fool to forget it." The words were out before he could stop them, and the instant they left his mouth, regret followed, but it was too late. Her face went white. "I see," she said softly. "Then my father truly succeeded. He destroyed your heart, and you've spent your life ensuring no one ever heals it." She turned and fled the room. For days they did not speak. Evelyn avoided him, working in the gardens or spending hours locked in the library. Adrian tried to focus on estate matters, but every sound, every footstep, reminded him of what he had done. And then came the fire. It began in the West Wing, a candle knocked over in the servants' quarters, fanned by a harsh spring wind. Within minutes smoke filled the halls. Evelyn was the first to smell it. She rushed through the corridors shouting for help. Flames licked the tapestries, devouring years of history. "Mrs. Linton, get the boy and the horses, quickly!" she cried. But above the roar of the fire, a voice called back, "His Grace is still inside!" Her heart seized. Without hesitation, she ran into the inferno. Adrian was trapped in the study. The smoke was thick. Beams cracked and fell as the fire consumed the shelves. He had tried to save Clara's letters, foolishly, and now the door was blocked. When it burst open, he thought for a moment he was hallucinating. Evelyn stood there, her gown already singed, coughing from the smoke. "Evelyn, no, get out! Not without you!" She fought through the haze, throwing her shawl over his face, tugging him toward the corridor. Flames climbed the walls like demons. A beam fell, nearly striking them. Adrian pulled her close, shielding her with his body. "This way!" she shouted, pointing toward the window. "The balcony!" They stumbled through the wreckage, half blind. Together they broke through the window and fell onto the snow below, coughing, choking, alive. The manor burned behind them, an orange storm against the night sky. Later, after the flames were finally doused, they stood among the ruins, bruised, ash-streaked, silent. Evelyn's hair clung to her face, her hands blistered. Adrian reached for her, but she stepped back. "You could have died," she said hoarsely. "So could you." "Then perhaps that would have suited us both," she whispered. He stared at her, the anger gone now, replaced with something far more dangerous, remorse. "I said cruel things," he began, "unforgivable things. Evelyn, Don't," she cut in. "Don't speak apologies born of smoke and near death. You cannot unmake what's been said." Tears welled in her eyes. "I loved you, Adrian, foolishly, completely. But love cannot grow from ashes and vengeance. He stepped forward, desperate. I can change! She shook her head. You shouldn't have to change. You should have been free long before you found me. Then she turned, walking away through the wreckage of Ravenshade, the flames behind her painting her silhouette in gold and sorrow. That night, Adrian found himself alone by the river that bordered the estate. The stars reflected dimly in the black water. He had built his life on vengeance, and in one night it had taken everything. He whispered her name into the dark, Evelyn. But only the wind answered. In the distance, the smouldering remains of the manor glowed faintly, like the dying embers of the world they had shared. He knew then that his greatest punishment was not losing the estate, or even his reputation. It was losing her. Letters never sent. Spring came late that year. The air over Ravenshade was cool and damp, carrying the scent of rain over scorched earth. The manor stood in ruins, half its wings collapsed, windows blackened like hollow eyes. What was once a symbol of pride had become a monument to regret. Evelyn had left weeks ago. The servants whispered that she'd gone to stay with a cousin in Devonshire, a small cottage by the sea. But for Adrian, the world felt quieter than the grave. He spent his days among the ruins, helping to rebuild what he could. Every plank replaced, every stone reset, felt like an act of penance. Yet no labour could rebuild what mattered most. At night, when sleep would not come, he sat by the lone surviving desk and wrote to her, over and over, letters he never sent. Evelyn, I cannot decide whether it is your silence or my own guilt that haunts me more. The fire took the walls, but not the echo of your voice. I walk through ashes and hear you still. I was wrong to call you your father's daughter. He destroyed lives, yes, but you breathed life into mine. If I could undo that night, I would. If I could give you peace, I'd burn every title and acre I own. But I fear you're better without me. He folded the letter and locked it in the drawer with the others. Evelyn stood at the edge of the cliff, her shawl whipping in the wind. Below, the waves broke against jagged rocks, the sea endless and grey. She had spent every day trying to forget the manor, the fire, his eyes. And every day she failed. The small cottage where she stayed was kind, filled with books, wildflowers, and distant gull cries. But her heart carried the sound of crackling fire, and a man's voice calling her name through smoke. In the evenings she wrote too. Her letters began as confessions, then became questions, then prayers. She sealed none of them. Your Grace, I tell myself, you are a man made of iron, unbending, unbroken. But when I close my eyes, I see you not as the Duke who came to ruin me, but as the man who shielded me from the fire. I loved you, Adrian. I still do. That is my curse. But love cannot live on what-ifs and ashes. Perhaps in another life, you and I might have begun without hatred between us. She placed the letter in the drawer beside the others and whispered, And may this be the last. But fate is rarely kind, and it listens even when one wishes it wouldn't. A letter did come, not from him, but about him. The wax seal bore the insignia of Blackwell Estates. Her heart thudded as she broke it open. Lady Evelyn, I write to inform you that His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshade, has taken ill. The strain of recent months has weakened him. The physicians are uncertain. It is my belief that you, above all others, might bring him peace should you choose to visit. Colonel Ashford, Steward of Ravenshade. The letter trembled in her hands. She stared at it for a long moment, torn between pride and longing, then packed her things. That night, she boarded the carriage north. When she arrived, The sight broke her. The manor stood half rebuilt, scaffolding against its wings, and the scent of new timber mixing with old ash. Servants bowed in surprise as she entered, but no one stopped her. They had seen enough pain to recognize love when it returned. Adrian was in the library, what was left of it. He sat in a chair by the window, thinner than she remembered, pale, his arm in a sling. A light draught stirred the ashes in the hearth. He didn't notice her at first. Then, when he did, he froze. "Evelyn!" She stood silent, her heart pounding. "You look worse than your letters described." His lips curved faintly. "Then you've been reading ghosts, too." She walked closer, her hands trembling. "Why didn't you send them?" "Cowardice," he admitted. "Every word I wrote felt too small beside what I had done." She looked at the half-finished room around them. "You've rebuilt this place alone." "I tried to rebuild everything," he said softly, "except the one thing that truly mattered." For a long time, neither spoke. The world beyond the window shimmered with sunlight through rain, the strange beauty of healing. Finally, she said, "You hurt me, Adrian, deeply, but I could not hate you, not even when I wanted to." He bowed his head. "Then let me try to be a man worthy of that mercy." She hesitated, then reached into her cloak and placed a folded parchment on the table. "I brought something too." He opened it. It was one of her unsent letters. Words full of heartbreak and grace. "I never posted it," she whispered. "I thought you'd never care to read it." "I would have crossed kingdoms too," he said hoarsely. Silence fell again, soft and fragile. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the tears shining in her eyes. "Tell me, Adrian," she murmured, "if I forgive you, what will you do with it?" He met her gaze, steady, humbled. "I'll spend the rest of my life deserving it." That night, the manor was quiet, not with loss this time, but peace. Adrian sat at his desk, a new sheet of parchment before him. He dipped his pen and began to write. "To the woman who saved me from myself, you were the ruin I needed, and now perhaps the reason I live." He looked up. Evelyn stood at the door, candlelight brushing her face. She smiled faintly. "Letters," she said. "Sometimes they find their way, even when never sent." He smiled back, eyes soft with wonder. "Then I'm finally found." The storm. He couldn't control. The summer sun rose over Ravenshade as though to bless what remained of it. The manor's west wing was under restoration, laughter slowly returning among the servants. And for the first time in years, music drifted from the ballroom once more. Evelyn had chosen to stay, at least for a time, not as guest nor mistress of the house, but as a woman learning to forgive and be forgiven. And Adrian, he was different now. The ruthless Duke had become a man who listened, who smiled without calculation, who could walk among his workers and thank them by name. Yet peace never lasts long in England's high society, especially when scandal has once stained a noble name. It arrived one evening as they dined quietly in the newly restored East Parlour, the first normal meal they had shared since her return. A footman approached with a sealed envelope. Adrian took it, broke the wax and frowned. Evelyn watched his eyes darken as he read. "What is it?" she asked softly. He slid the letter across the table. "His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshade, and Miss Evelyn Hargrove are hereby summoned to appear before the Privy Council to answer charges of fraud and misconduct regarding the Hargrove estate inheritance. Signed, Lord Pembroke." Evelyn's breath caught. "Pembroke! Again!" Adrian's jaw clenched. "He never forgave your father for outbidding him on the Hargrove holdings. Now he means to ruin what's left, through you." She rose to her feet. "Then we go, together." He hesitated. "They will question everything. Your honor, your family, even us." She met his gaze steadily. Let them. I have lived long enough in silence. I will not hide behind shame that isn't mine. He looked at her, the woman he once thought to destroy, now standing beside him, unflinching. For the first time in years, he felt pride not in his name, but in the woman who spoke it without fear. The great oak doors of the Privy Council chamber loomed before them. Inside sat a semicircle of lords and ministers, faces carved in stone, voices sharp with judgment. The scent of ink and candle wax thickened the air. Evelyn wore a plain grey gown, her hair pinned simply, her hands folded to still their tremor. Adrian stood beside her, tall, calm, his expression unreadable. Lord Pembroke rose from his seat, bowing mockingly. "Your Grace, Miss Hargrove, I see your alliance remains intact." Adrian's voice was cold. "Speak your accusation, Pembroke. I've little patience for theatrics." Pembroke smirked. "Very well. I accuse Miss Hargrove of withholding assets illegally seized by her late father, including documents that rightfully belong to the Crown. I further accuse you, Duke, of harbouring her and concealing such evidence." Murmurs rippled across the room. Evelyn's pulse pounded. "That's a lie! Then prove it," Pembroke sneered. "Produce the missing papers." Adrian's hand brushed hers beneath the table, a silent vow of strength. Then, slowly, he stood. "You want proof? Then you shall have it." He reached into his coat and drew forth a folded, weathered bundle, the original contract between Lord Hargrove and the Crown, the same one Adrian's father had once concealed in a bid for power. "Here," he said, his voice steady. "The documents were never stolen by the Hargroves. They were taken by my father to frame hers. If guilt must be named, it belongs to the Blackwells, and I bear that name." Gasps filled the hall. Evelyn's eyes widened, tears glinting. He had destroyed his own legacy to save hers. Pembroke's face turned crimson. "You would tarnish your bloodline for a woman?" Adrian turned to him, eyes like stormlight. For truth and for love, the chamber fell silent. After a long deliberation, the council declared Evelyn innocent. The Hargrove estate was restored, her name cleared. But Adrian, his confession meant his family's political influence was gone. The Duke of Ravensshade had fallen from grace. They rode home under a low grey sky. Neither spoke for miles. Finally, Evelyn turned to him. "You gave up everything," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Everything that was never worth keeping." She looked away, tears gathering. "And now?" He took her hand in his. "Now, I build something new. Not out of vengeance, but out of love. If you'll let me." She laughed softly through her tears. "You always speak like a man who commands armies." He smiled. "Only one heart ever truly conquered me." That night, the storm came. Rain battering the manor, wind howling through the corridors. The fire crackled in the hearth as Evelyn stood by the window, watching lightning fork across the moors. Adrian entered quietly, removing his coat, his shirt damp from the rain. She turned to him, searching his face. "Was it worth it?" she asked. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Every wound, every battle, every fall, if it brought me here, then yes." She swallowed. "You're free now. No titles, no debts. What will you do with your freedom?" He smiled, leaning close. "I'll build a world where you can smile without fear." Her breath caught. "And if I refuse to be part of that world?" He whispered, "Then I'll spend my days trying to make it one you'd want to return to." For a long, trembling moment, they stood in silence. The storm raged outside, but between them, peace. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't the desperate kiss of the masquerade, nor the broken one of fire and regret. It was soft, slow, certain, the promise of a love rebuilt. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and for the first time, the world felt whole again. The next morning, the storm had passed. Ravenshade shimmered under fresh sunlight, every leaf jeweled with rain. The rebuilding continued, but this time laughter filled the air, and Evelyn's hands guided every plan. And Adrian, once a man of vengeance, now spent his days among his workers, not as a duke commanding subjects, but as a man helping build a home, brick by brick, hope by hope. The world he had sworn to destroy was gone, but in its place something new and far more beautiful had begun. The world he built for her 5 years later. Morning sunlight spilled across the rolling fields of Ravenshade, now reborn. The manor, once a ruin of ash and sorrow, stood proud again, ivy climbing its pale stone walls, windows glittering with new glass. The gardens stretched wide and wild, roses blooming along cobblestone paths, where laughter echoed once more. And in the heart of it all, Evelyn Blackwell stood on the terrace, her hands resting on the railing, watching the mist lift from the valley. The wind carried the scent of lavender and damp earth. Behind her, she could hear faint voices, the laughter of children chasing each other through the hall. Her lips curved softly. "Thomas, Clara, mind the steps," she called. The footsteps slowed, and 2 small figures appeared, a boy with dark hair and curious grey eyes, and a little girl with curls the colour of autumn wheat. They grinned at her, breathless. "Mama, Papa said we could see the stables today." She smiled, kneeling to adjust the boy's coat. "Did he now? Then you must promise to behave." "We promise," Clara said solemnly, before giggling and darting off again. Evelyn straightened, shaking her head with amusement. "They have his spirit," she murmured. Inside, Adrian was finishing a letter at his desk, the same old mahogany one that had survived the fire. His hair was streaked faintly with silver now, but his shoulders remained strong, his presence as steady as ever. He sealed the letter and looked up as Evelyn entered. "Writing to the council again?" she asked. He nodded. "Another request for funds to build the new school in the village. We've nearly enough." She walked behind him, her hands settling lightly on his shoulders. "You've rebuilt more than this manor, Adrian. You've rebuilt a life." He smiled, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. "No, we did. You planted the first stone when you came back." She touched the scar on his temple, a faint line from the fire, now a part of him. "Do you ever think of what might have been if we hadn't met?" He turned to face her, eyes deep with quiet certainty. "I'd have become my father, cold, hollow, lost in the echo of my own rage. You gave me something he never could, a purpose." "And you gave me home," she whispered. Later that afternoon, the village of Ravenshade was alive with colour and sound. The Duke and Duchess walked hand in hand through the cobbled streets as ribbons fluttered from the lampposts. Musicians played near the green, and laughter rippled from every corner. Adrian paused by the new schoolhouse, freshly painted and bright. The children's laughter from within mingled with the hum of the fair. Evelyn looked at it with pride. "It's beautiful," he nodded. "A far cry from what I once wanted. Power, revenge, a name that made men bow." "And now?" she asked, smiling. He glanced down at her. "Now I'd rather hear one child laugh than 1,000 men salute." They shared a quiet look, the kind of look that only comes from having walked through fire and come out hand in hand. As twilight deepened, torches were lit across the festival grounds. Evelyn and Adrian sat on a hillside overlooking the village. A blanket spread beneath them, the children asleep nearby. The stars shimmered above like spilled diamonds. "Do you remember," she said softly, "the night you arrived at Hargrove Hall?" He chuckled. "How could I forget? I came to destroy you. And instead, I found myself." She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You promised to ruin my world, Adrian." He wrapped an arm around her, his voice low against her hair. "I did, and then I built it again, this time with you at its heart." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the lanterns drift into the night sky, small, glowing stars carried by the wind. Long after both had grown grey and time had slowed their steps, one of their children, now grown, discovered a box hidden in the old library. Inside lay a bundle of letters, yellowed and tied with faded ribbon. The first was in Evelyn's hand. "My dearest, if you are reading this, it means our story has already found its peace. Perhaps the world will remember the Duke who rebuilt Ravenshade, but I will always remember the man who learned to love without armor. You came into my life to destroy it, and instead you gave it back to me. That is the truest miracle I know. Your Evelyn." And beneath it, another in his familiar script. "To my dearest Evelyn, every stone of this house bears your touch. Every field blooms because of your kindness. The world I built was never mine. It was always ours. If eternity has mercy, let me find you there once more. Adrian, years fade, and so do stories. But the legend of Ravenshade remains, the tale of a man who came seeking vengeance and found redemption in the very heart he meant to destroy. Visitors still speak of the gardens Evelyn planted, the school Adrian built, the manor that rose from ashes stronger than before. And when the wind moves through the roses on a quiet evening, some say you can still hear them, her laughter, his voice, and the promise that began it all. He promised to destroy her world and ended up building it.